It's okay. Well, I'm so happy to be here with you. How's it going?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. It's 9:30 in the morning and I just got off a plane yesterday from California, so in my brain it's like 7. I'm doing really good actually.
No, yeah, I was about to say you're doing really good. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having me. It's so exciting.
Absolutely. Congratulations on your first book.
Thank you so much. I feel like it's been an extremely long journey from writing it
You're right.
to having it in my hand and sharing it with the world. So sometimes I'll be like flipping through and I'm like, oh my God, who wrote this? This is good.
So for those that don't know about the journey of how you wrote the book, do you mind sharing a little bit about the beginnings, when you first started and how you got to this point?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Dale. Sorry, I didn't say that before.
It's okay.
Dale Walls, and my book is called The Queer Girl Is Going to Be Okay. It's a young adult novel that takes place in Houston. Shout out to the place where I am from, the place where it all, came together.
Right.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I went to Carnegie Vanguard for most of the experience. Part of it, I went to HSPVA, which is the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts, where I was a creative writing major.
I used to think that that was like the dream school.
Really?
When I was in high school, I was like, all the cool kids went to HSPVA, I think.
Yeah, it was a fun experience. There's a very convoluted story about how I ended up leaving, but yeah, so I ended up at Carnegie and we had this course where you had to write a very lengthy research paper. I was kind of in the midst of like figuring out my identity and like who I was and what's going on, but instead of processing that emotionally, I just did it intellectually. And so I was like, great, I'll write a paper about queer representation in American films from the 60s to the present. And my findings, not so great.
I can imagine so.
Yes, a lot of very harmful stereotypes. And so after writing this paper, I think it was like 60 pages or something, I decided to create a response to the paper or a solution to the paper, which was a film. I wrote a film script, a screenplay against stereotypes. And I made it for young adults because I think I've just always found that to be like the place where I want to make an impact. It's like younger people. I guess I was also a teenager at the time.
Yeah.
So that
you
makes
wrote
sense.
what you wanted to see.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I just had a movie script, and I was like 17 or something, so I was like, I'm not gonna make a movie. So it kind of just collected dust. When I went to college, I had some friends who encouraged me to do something with it. And again, I was just like, I'm not making a movie. So I converted it or adapted it into a manuscript, and that was kind of a long process because I was also, trying to get my undergraduate degree and figure out if I was going to go to grad school, which, spoiler alert, I did. So yeah, it just took me, I was in between assignments after classes working on it. And then towards the end of my undergrad career, I started trying to get an agent, got an agent. He pitched it. Shout out to Garrett Albert at Emerald City Lit. And he helped me get a publisher, Levi and Carito. And now my book is right before me, before my very eyes.
So that's years and years before you're able to hold this book in your hands. And it wasn't something that started out as a book. Has writing a book ever been something that you imagined for yourself?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I wanted to write screenplays. I wanted to like create movies. I just thought there was a lot of power behind, the screen, the sort of, films. But I'm also just a huge reader, and I always have been, growing up. My brother and I were always told, like, obviously we didn't have phones because it was like the early
Back in
2000s,
the day, yeah.
But our parents would be like, stop reading at the table. And sometimes my sister.
I feel like every reader understands that.
Yeah. So I think there was a sort of inevitability to the fact that I would write a book or even continue to write books. Like I'm already working on 2 more.
2 more?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think something about having this in my hand, I was like,
It just kind of
I could
kickstarted
do, I could do
everything.
another one. Like, it seemed really like something to trudge through towards the end of the process. You know, when you're like going back and forth with your editor, doing like revision, revision, revision. It's like, oh my god, I've read this book all the way through so many times, and it's
Right.
like I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like I don't know how to fix this one little narrative aspect. Um, but once it was done, I was like, oh my god, yeah, let's do another one. Yeah, so yeah, I guess my answer is it felt correct
Right.
to have a book out in the world, and
Yeah.
I think if it wasn't this, it would have been something else.
No, yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the way that you described about reading your whole life, it's like writing is inevitably something that I think goes hand in hand if you are a big reader, right? So to know that you have done something and it's here in its physical form, it may feel easier to pursue continuing to do. And it seems like you enjoyed the process.
I did, absolutely. I think I love to lie, make things up.
Okay. That's
And
such an interesting way of saying that.
I don't know. I think there's like such a joy in like just riffing and like and you know, coming up with these characters in my head, and then I don't know, this concept that I always had around writing is like, oh, I have these little people and I make them do things, but if I don't write anything for them to do, they don't, like, nothing happens. They just
Right.
like stand still. I don't know, like in my head the concept is that they're like standing in a little room. I'm
Just
like,
waiting for instructions.
yeah, waiting for instructions, and I'm like, I need to like make something up and like get them to, you know, go out into the city like have chats with each other.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I find a lot of joy in the process of writing. I think the more logistical aspect of like,
Yeah.
oh my god, how do I get them to go from this room to this room, and like how do I make sure that the narratives thread together and that everyone is getting their moment, especially because this book does have 3
Right.
POVs, which I don't know why I did that to myself, but it felt important that each of them had like their own moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that to be like the trickier aspect. I'm more interested in like the
The
fun,
imagination.
yeah, the
and
imagination, the
art.
fun of the plot, the art of lying and fabrication. But yeah, I think I could learn a lot from just reading more and more. And
Yeah.
especially YA novels. I've definitely always been like an adult fiction person.
Really?
Even as a middle schooler, like high schooler.
Yeah.
I
I
was
think I was the same way, but I feel like that was out of rebellion, to be honest.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I read Flowers for Algernon when I was like in 3rd grade, and I was like,
Whoa.
adults are out of control. Like, I gotta get into this. Like, the scandal of this. And so I have found myself like backtracking and trying to understand the narrative form of young adult writing, because it is kind of its own category.
It is, yeah. I always tell people I am such a big advocate for young adult writing and books in general. I read so much YA because I think people give it a bad rep, or they think like I'm too old, or the story isn't relatable to me. And I often find that to be very untrue, like almost every single time. I mean, to be fair, some YA books do feel very YA as an adult, but there's always a message there if you allow yourself to receive it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this book deals with like a lot of difficult topics in my perception, and I think a lot of feedback I've gotten has been like, more bad things should have happened. I'm like, whoa,
What?
really? Do you think so? I'm like, these are children. Like, I don't know. And I think going into this process, I wanted to not shy away from things that were like a little bit more adult perceived you know, situations, because it's like, you know, when you're a teenager, like these things happen to you and you have to like take them seriously. And I think, I don't know, it's just strange to hear feedback that like you should be dealing with these topics even more seriously, and it's like, oh, so I guess YA is like a space where you can kind of just do like adult type narratives, but everyone is like 16. Like, I don't really understand, but again, that's just, I need to read more, even more YA, which is extremely possible now because I'm going to all these book conferences to talk about my book with like librarians and
Mm.
teens and things like that. And every time I go, I meet like 30 other authors, and each one of them gives me a copy of their book.
Oh,
So now,
wow. So now you just have stacks of books.
yeah, and also I'm usually traveling for these, so I'll come with like a half empty suitcase now,
Yeah.
understanding that I'm going to be leaving with like a bunch of ARCs or advanced reader copies and
Mhm.
new friends books. So,
No,
yeah.
that's amazing. I think I was really thinking about what you said about people saying that your character should have gone through even harder things. I find that to be so interesting because in the world I think we live in now, the idea of children and teens being just children and teens is starting to fade faster
Mm.
and faster. I was curious what you thought about that in writing your book and the issues that they deal with in the book.
Yeah, I think I don't know if this is even in a contemporary context, but I am always, when I'm writing, thinking about how I perceived the world as a teenager
Mm.
and how every problem was like the biggest problem
It
to
had no
me.
end.
Literally. It's like this relationship is the relationship, or like this grade is the grade that's
Mm.
gonna, determine if I am a flop and a failure or the president of the United States, which was never my goal, but I always had that in my head. Like as
Like,
a
just in case you
university.
don't want to ruin your
Right,
chances.
right, exactly. And so I think, coming to my idea of writing, younger characters with this sort of seriousness and intentionality is
Mhm.
is like something I didn't want to shy away from. Um, but let me redirect to your actual question.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think like teenagers should be allowed to be teenagers and
Yeah.
have like their, I don't know, the follies of youth, if you will. Guys sound like whatever. The follies of youth, but at the same time, I think I brought up that idea of seriousness because there is sometimes an underestimation of young people and like their ability to participate in larger conversations about the
Mhm.
world, about
Mhm.
interpersonal relationships, about the way that our society is moving forward. It's like this dismissal is like, you don't know anything yet, but it's
Yeah.
like these are the people who are constantly learning new things. Like, if anything, they know so
And
much.
they're living it right next to us. It's not like they're,
Exactly.
like, in this bubble of not knowing.
Right. And there's also the aspect of like they are inheriting, whatever is being worked through right now in our
Mhm.
society, in our world, in our culture. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, we're just making decisions and the kids will deal with it.
Right.
And it's like, no, they will literally have to deal with it. So I don't know. I'm not sure that I mean, I understand the idea that, teenagers maybe are being asked to become adults a lot faster, but I
Yeah.
think there is still this culture of, dismissing younger people
Yeah.
and their ideas and their beliefs as, sort of childish or,
Mhm.
naive. Uh, but at the same time, it's like these are the people who are leading us forward, so like listen to them.
Right.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I never want to bring an air of what's a good word? What's the word? Infantilization to how I deal with my characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want them to like interact with the world maybe as I'm interacting with the world as like
Mhm.
a person with real concerns and
Right.
real problems,
Right.
and like reacting to them in a way that makes sense for my circumstances. So.
Mhm. Mhm. No, yeah, I mean, I think that is the best way to approach it in a lot of different ways because I think that people just assume that since YA is its own genre, right? That the teens will deal with adult things as adults do, but like teens
Mm,
are messy.
yeah, yeah,
So like I feel like when people talk about, oh, I feel like it was too messy or not messy enough, it's like it doesn't make sense. Like
right, absolutely.
there's no real way to, I think, capture any category of person
Mm,
correctly because we're all different
right.
and our experiences are different as well too.
Mm.
And that leads me to my other question of, for you, what experiences do you feel like you have had to process and work through to be able to write this book?
Ooh. Yeah, I think a lot of what happens in this book is based off of my own experiences as a young person. Even though there are three distinct characters, I'm I was very much at the time like pulling from my friendships, the circumstances that we were all dealing with, and trying to like meld them into this narrative. I
Mm.
mean, even as I've gone along year after year working on this, I've sort of pulled more of my experiences into the book.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I think especially when it comes to the filmmaking aspect and like trying to figure out what queer love is, through all these sort of fictionalized, um, I guess, film excerpts, I was processing my own understanding of what queer love is, queer interpersonal relationships, how you can find
Mm.
family outside of your like biological family or
Right.
have found family. I think, a lot of the friendships that I built in high school and college, in grad school and beyond, have been a way for me to find, um, sort of a safety and care in people that I was not biologically attached to,
Right.
but instead chose to sort of take very seriously, our relationships and consider them as my own family as I like
Mm.
navigate, um, new adulthood, if you want to
Right.
use like a term from literature. Yeah, I think I could not have written this book if I wasn't able to understand my own positionality
Mm.
as a queer person, as a non-binary person, as someone from Texas who's like obviously very steeped in like Baptist Christian culture, uh, but still but I still needed to sort of navigate, how I was going to become a fully functioning person
Right.
outside of like a culture that raised me and you know sort of gave me all of my values and notions of what a person is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
I love what you said about found family and, the family that you are a part of outside of your biological family. Were they a big support system for you throughout the years as you were writing this book?
My sister has been my biggest support. She's actually here with us. um Her name is Joy. She's a wonderful person. She's my biggest cheerleader. I have never
Mm.
known anyone in this lifetime, who has more wholeheartedly loved me and everything that I've ever done in this
Aw.
life. So she's definitely been like my rock and my, motivating force. She's also the very last person that I acknowledge, in the book in the acknowledgments, and I list her as my, unofficial official manager, which is just an ongoing, oh, she's crying, I'm gonna cry.
Aw.
Ongoing, years long, bit where we help each other like achieve our goals and
Mm.
navigate life together. And I'm like, I literally don't know if this book would exist without her. So
That's so
yeah.
beautiful. I think having someone to be in your corner like that, as you do something that can be very scary for so many reasons,
Mm.
right, is always reassuring of you as a person, but that you can do hard things as well too, and not have
Mm.
to only rely on yourself for that strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more juicy answer, the more difficult answer is that I had some difficulties navigating, coming from like a very religious family that, certainly had its own structural beliefs around what is right and what is wrong when it comes to gender, sexuality, etc.
Mm.
Um, and I think this book has been a way for me to move through that. Um, I think a lot of the writing that I did in high school, especially, I would write under like pseudonyms, or I would like hide my accomplishments,
Mm.
because you know all this time I was just writing about like queer topics. I was just
Yeah.
trying to figure out like who I was and what was going on with me, and uh, So I don't yeah, that was I think maybe I would have done a lot more writing a lot more freely as a young person if I
Mm.
felt like I wasn't going to hell or something.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
I think it's also a key aspect, you know?
Mm.
It's like without this element of difficulty, without this element of, having to persevere through uh my circumstances and like build my own beliefs
Mm.
and my own understanding of what was right for me and acceptable among the people that I like associated with,
Yeah.
um, maybe I would not have had the charge to write this book and
Mm.
maybe the charge to be a writer at all. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like as you say that, there's so many people that resonate with what you're saying in this moment of wanting to explore your identity and write about it and feel grounded in it, but be in a surrounding that is very restrictive or judgmental or is not accepting of
Mm,
all of you.
yeah.
Right? What would you say to those that are really trying to figure that part of it out right now?
Oh my gosh. Um, I would say if you're an artist in any aspect, just continue to create your art, even if you have to do it in small in between moments or in the shadows. Like you have to keep going. You
Mm.
have to work through your art and create yourself through your art. I think. I don't know. Oh gosh, this is such a hard question.
Mm.
Um, you know, even the book is dedicated, to all the queer kids in the South, is what it says in the opening pages, because I just like have such an empathy for people who are not able to be themselves fully.
Yeah.
Um, it's like it's such an extreme hindrance on
Yeah.
like becoming a person.
Yeah.
If you feel like, oh, this is who I am, this is what I want, and I'm aware,
Hmm.
but I can't. I literally can't. Um, so yeah, I would just say like work so hard to be yourself no
Yeah.
matter what the circumstances are. If even if you're in danger or you feel unsafe, like you have to pursue selfhood in small moments.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think identity is so important in all aspects of the lives that we are given and that we live, right? So to not be able to be fully who you want to be, like you said, is a hindrance, but is so damaging,
Mm,
you know, and it is important to continue to find yourself in any area of life that you can, where you can feel free.
mm, mhm.
So I'm wondering for you, what does the work look like for you in order to continue to be free and to be who you are as a person fully?
Yeah, I think maybe the work is like a fierce pursuance of joy, you
Yeah.
know? I sometimes in my classes, if I'm given an opportunity to write about what my research is on, or oh, sorry, I'm in a PhD at Stanford University in art history. Uh, which will factor into one of my next book projects. So
Oh, okay. A
yes,
little sneak
a
peek.
little sneak peek. I would say, yeah. Sometimes when I'm given the opportunity to write about, why I research what I research, I will talk about my friends. I'll talk about queer community. I'll talk about um, how I'm able to relate to other artists.
Hmm.
I think that yeah, the work of understanding myself is understanding other people like me, other people that
Hmm.
love me and support me, um, partners. I have one. I don't know why I said it with an S. um, Friendships and I don't know, just allowing myself to be surrounded with other people who are fully themselves and
Yeah.
uplift me and I'm able to uplift them. I think that's the sort of core of understanding how I can move forward as a
Mm.
creative person, as a queer person,
Mm.
as a writer. Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that's the work.
Yeah, there's something so beautiful about being in a friendship or relationship where you both can pour into each other, and allow yourselves to feel safe enough to be fully you without fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that outside of that being incredibly healing, it's also so validating and can be a safe place to land,
Yes.
if the world is feeling, well, not feeling, but if the world is doing what it's doing.
And it is. And it is. Something else that I was really interested in writing this novel is the idea of queer failure.
Mm.
And, you know, just letting young LGBT people know that they don't have to have a perfect love story,
Right.
or a perfect interpersonal relationship. Their parents don't have to, you know, think they're amazing. I think I was super interested in just being like, how can these girls flop, but still, you know, like overcome the
Yeah,
flop?
have their happy ending, or just like
Yes.
have some sort of resolution to it without it being like,
Right,
oh, everything is great.
right.
I'm accepted everywhere.
Mm.
Everything is like awesome. And I'm just able to be free immediately. That's not always the case.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of poor decision making that takes place, which is like, okay,
and
well,
I
they're
love
all like
that.
17, of
Yeah,
course.
like they're not gonna make perfect decisions all the time.
Hmm.
That to me is real.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think I'm never going to pursue writing unflawed characters, especially teenagers. I need them to make so many mistakes,
Yeah.
ones that are in their absolute worst interest, so
Yeah.
that they can sort of claw back from
Hmm.
that. Um, and it makes not only an interesting story, but also, you know, characters that you want to do well, characters that you're
Rooting
interested in them
for.
making the right
Yeah.
choice, even
Right.
if they don't.
And it might be frustrating to
Yeah,
watch them make the wrong choice over and over again, but
right.
to me, that's relatable
Mm-hmm.
because, yeah, I don't want to read a book where I'm like, dang, she's just getting it right every time. Like, and what am I doing? Definitely not that, right? I
Right.
want to see myself in the pages of being like, ooh, I might have done this too,
Hmm. I
and that
think
might have
there,
been bad.
yeah, I think I also felt a lot of restriction around, or I could have, but I sort of
Mm.
turned away from the idea of, you know, there's such limited representation of like LGBT characters, so they should be like perfect and amazing and beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
they should have a cool partner that loves them, and their parents are amazing, you know, blah blah blah. Especially because I was writing against stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I started working through the characters, I was like, well, I'm not interested in perfection. I'm interested in realism.
Right.
And I think that was a big aspect of my coming to these three characters,
Yeah.
and especially having the three point of view structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and I really appreciate that, honestly. I think, again, it makes it relatable and I think leaves a long lasting impact on those that are still trying to figure out identity, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking about identity, we can also not talk about mental health as well. I think they go
Mm-hmm.
hand in hand. And I'm wondering for you, what has your journey through mental health looked like for you as you have grown into who you are as a person, and have become more grounded in your identity?
Yeah, I think I used to have a lot of really bad depression, especially in high school, because I was convinced that I was hellbound, and like my
Mm.
parents hated me, and or would, you know, and like God hated me, which, you know, it's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot to think
Yeah.
that like
To carry that
a
and have
vast
nowhere to put
entity is
it.
like
Just specifically hates you.
literally me, just me.
And it's all your fault.
Yeah, especially for something that I was like, well, this isn't going away, so like, what am I gonna do?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I spent a lot of time feeling very depressed. Um, but I think, you know, going to college, even meeting people in high school who were like kind of on my same wavelength, helped me a lot. And
Mm.
I was able to sort of overcome a lot of sadness that I think had like built a like deep well within me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, I was, one bucket at a time,
Right.
scoop it out, and replace that with like lovely friendships and positive feelings. But still, I do currently have always dealt with a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, I think it helps me actually, if I'm being real. I think I was anxious about like, what if this manuscript doesn't go anywhere? So then
Yeah.
I was like frantically emailing agents. I was like, what if I don't get into grad school? And then
Mhm.
I, was like working really hard on my applications. And so there is this aspect of like working with my anxiety and
Right.
then like letting it rule my life in a
Right.
negative way. Um, I know that's not useful for a lot of people.
I
Yeah.
disagree. I think sometimes we have this idea that anxiety is only bad, right?
Mm,
Like if you struggle with anxiety, that means that you can't do anything and it's very limiting, or you're always constantly worried about things. But
mm,
sometimes, like you said, working with your anxiety, also knowing your limits,
mm.
right, can help you achieve the things that you want to achieve. There's just a thin line there, and it takes some self
Yes.
awareness to know, okay, you've entered the
Mm,
danger zone. How can we reel it back in? But if you're working with it, I don't really see an issue with it.
right. Yeah, I think I don't know. That's an ongoing process. An
Yeah.
ongoing process is figuring out how I can embrace anxiety so that
Mhm.
it will propel me forward
Yeah.
rather than holding me back.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't see it really going anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, it doesn't. As a therapist, that is something
mm,
that I tell people all the time. It's not something that completely disappears. If it did, I mean, kind of be unsafe because we
mm,
do need anxiety a little bit to keep us safe in dangerous situations, right? But if you're able to be in your body and be aware of when again things are getting a little bit too out of hand, and you feel like you can't ground yourself, then that's where the danger zone is. But
mm,
it's never going to go away,
mhm,
and it doesn't have to feel like bad that it's not going to go away.
right.
Do you have a mental health practice that you do, especially with now juggling grad school
Mhm.
and being a first time author? I can imagine your schedule is probably pretty hectic. How do you balance it all?
Yeah, I definitely go to therapy every week, and
I
I
love that for you.
thank you.
And me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very grounding to have someone to talk to.
You can't beat it.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's been like a huge aspect of my like being able to navigate doing all of this at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But besides that, taking lessons from my therapist about how to manage anxiety. I do a lot of just like I try to do deep breathing, and like I think reading is very calming activity for me. Listening to podcasts. It doesn't really matter like what the podcast is about. I just need like
People in conversation.
yeah, I need to
Mhm.
hear someone talking, which is so funny because I sometimes get really, really anxious if I'm in like a crowded space and a
Mhm.
lot of people are talking. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, if only I could hear two strangers talking, that would really relax me.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think just taking time away from like writing, grad school, interpersonal relationships, which can sometimes be anxiety inducing,
For
even if they're
sure.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to isolate a lot, which I don't know if that's extremely like a good coping. I don't know if it's a great coping mechanism.
Again, thin line.
Yeah, I have a lovely home in Oakland, and I think I hide there,
Yeah.
and
It's your safe space.
my sister has been teaching me the ways of luxury, and I have really soft sheets now and
Oh,
like nice rugs and pillows and things, and so I just
well, get your
cocoon.
money's worth. I get
Yeah,
it. I get
exactly.
it.
I think
Yeah.
that's been a very useful way to navigate a lot of anxiety that comes up for me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the world in and of itself is a very intense place that's very stimulating. There's so many things happening at once. So if you have a safe space to be in, I mean,
mm,
I wouldn't leave,
yeah.
right?
Also, journaling to relate back to writing.
Okay.
I journal every single day.
Oh, wow.
I'm a very unemotional journaler, though. I just sort of document what happened, and I find to be extremely helpful
People
because
give that type of journaling a bad rep, and I don't see an issue with, again,
It's
professionally. I think it's perfect. Sometimes you just need to put what happened down, and that's it.
Yeah, I also have a very poor memory. I don't know if that's related to anxiety, but to flip back and be like, what was I doing on Tuesday in
Yeah, you're like,
2000
oh yeah,
19
I remember that now.
in
Okay,
March. It's like,
okay.
oh, it's yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
very it feels very good in my heart to like know where my body has been
Yeah.
in space. Which is, yeah, I don't know.
To me, you're still reflecting just
Mm,
because there's no like space for so many big emotions on the page. That
mm,
doesn't mean that you're not being present
right.
with what you're doing and your body. And like, I think
Mm,
it is great to be able to be like, okay, Tuesday, July 2nd or whatever, I was here. Oh yeah,
mm,
I do remember that. And then most times you're like, okay, what happened? Who did I talk to that day? What did we talk about? Oh, this made me feel like this. And that could spark something as well
mhm.
too. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find there's also like a little bit of telling on myself through the documentation. I'll say I went here, I did this, I did that, but I'll slip in like some adjectives here and there, but I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't like that person when we talked.
And you're like, oh, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, journaling.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And you, to me, it seems like you've been able to keep up with everything.
Hmm.
Um, something that I always ask authors, especially newer authors, is in the world that we live in now, having a social media presence is usually kind of required
Hmm.
as an
Hmm.
author. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so bad at it. It's treacherous. I can't imagine, like, oh my God, I just got sick thinking about it. The way creating an Instagram post is like more stressful for me than like reading a whole book or like writing a
Wow.
paper. Like, how is
Wow.
this harder? Like, I don't know. My partner is also like an artist or musician, and she's like so on top of it. She wakes up in the morning, she reposts everyone who mentioned her on Instagram. Like,
Wow.
she makes her little post in the caption. I'm like, oh my God, how do you do it? And so I think I've been learning from her, but also my sister helps me out. She's like, so you haven't made that post yet? I'm like, no. She's like, okay, well, how is anyone going to know about this event or
Right.
this thing that you did if you don't post about
Hmm.
it? And so that type of pressure is useful for me.
Yeah.
But I would say at the end of the day, social media is treacherous, and I think everyone should get off of it.
I can't argue with you there for many reasons.
Yeah.
I'll say though, the book community that's where
It's a wholesome
that's where I'm at.
space.
It is.
It's
I mean, trust it has its things, of
yes.
course.
Oh,
Like
indeed.
any
Even most recently, my goodness. A lot of scandals in the book
a lot of
community.
scandals, and to me, that I hate when those things happen because
Mm,
I'm like, oh, I just want to come talk about books and
yeah.
then leave.
It's also like 80% of the time something racist. So.
Yeah, and then it brings up bigger conversations on the publishing industry in general, so
Mhm.
on and so forth. So that part I don't like. Definitely hate that. Hate that.
Yeah.
But talking about books with mutuals who read similar things, and
Yeah.
because for me, I actually discovered your book from Bookstagram. One of my
Oh.
friends posted she got an arc for it. I was like, oh, this looks like a cool cover. And I went
Mm.
to read and I was like, oh, this sounds very interesting. Okay, I'm into that. So yeah, that to me is the good of
Mm.
it. And then, everything has bad as well.
Yeah, I think if you can find like your community online, that's
Mhm.
hugely useful. I mean, I had a have currently a YouTube channel, and I'm on a vast hiatus. But it was in why do I keep talking in the past tense? My God. It is called Art and Color, and
Mhm.
it is a community of people who are interested in learning about art, and I just talk about artists
Mm.
of color, mostly contemporary.
Okay.
I found the comment section to be like a very wholesome space. I
I
felt like,
love that.
oh, I'm more directly communicating with people than, just like writing research
Mhm.
papers for like 3 people to read. I found that to be very useful.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think the greater landscape of social media can be a really troubling space. Like I don't have Twitter downloaded onto my phone. I don't have the Instagram app. I like have to go to like
Instagram.com.
Instagram.com if I want.
Honestly, Again, that might be the best to make sure that you're like not getting like too attached. Because I think, that could also trigger so much anxiety as well too.
Hmm.
Especially because you have a book in the world, which means people will be reading and reviewing and
Oh,
then
yes.
sharing those reviews. And people, I think, there's so many conversations on giving feedback and commenting on books recently. And I think some people are doing it in ways that are concerning.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually having a YA novel because like when you first put it out into the world, like before it is in bookstores, you're getting reviews from like librarians and like professional book reviewers, and they're usually just like adults. And
Yeah.
so a lot of my early feedback, which was very important because it was the only feedback I'd heard besides people that like are being paid to help me with the book, was like, I didn't really relate to this. Like, I'm 40. Like, this wasn't for me. And I was like, no, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure.
But to me, it's like you didn't take anything from it. Like, even if you don't relate to it, that's where I always, but that might be my own thing. So.
And it's just very interesting. But later on, like, I most recently had an event at the San Francisco Public Library in their teen area room section called The Mix, and talking to like actual teenagers about the book. I was like, oh, this feels wonderful.
Yeah.
this is incredible.
I wrote it for you.
Yeah.
So.
This is the exact type of conversation that I want to have around this book. And actually everything else feels like super irrelevant. Especially if it's negative. I'm like, what do I care?
Right.
Like if a 16-year-old said to me, like, I don't like this book, I think that would hurt much more.
For sure. But
also I get it because, yeah, so I think social media is incredible. It's a space to connect with people, but also I think the most meaningful conversations I've had have been like in person with like a high schooler looking me in the eye and saying, this book means something to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Or like, I related to this particular aspect, or I didn't relate to this particular aspect. And, yeah.
I mean, to just kind of tie it into my next question, what would the high school version of you that started this book think about everything that you're doing right now?
Oh, scary question.
Why scary?
I don't know. I feel like I was just like such a anxious teenager. Like overconfident in my skills for sure, but anxious all the way. I think I would probably, my younger self, I would be really proud. I think, I've always wanted to like share my words with the world, and this is a very direct manifestation of that.
Yeah.
I think I would probably be super shocked that I like decided to put my name on this book. And it has the word queer in the title, and that's amazing. Maybe like gratitude and surprise would be the two words if I had to pick. I don't know. I'm always thinking back towards my younger self and pursuing different YA writing projects, especially the two that I have on the back burner right now. On the burner right now. That person, they're in my heart always and forever, and
I mean, I hope that you continue to spend time with her and carry her as you continue writing all of the books that you have planned. And I know you said 2, but could be very much some way more than that. And I hope that you also remember always the good conversations that you're having with your targeted audience, which are young adults. And I hope that they're able to see your strength and confidence and continue their journey and their identity as well too.
Yeah, I'm super hopeful as things move forward. It just came out at the end of November, and so there is sort of this waiting period, I think, of trying to see what type of feedback I'll get, and I'm doing a lot more traveling next year related to the book.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that anyone would interact with this book at all, and then beyond that to get to get feedback. I'm super excited.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how the rest of your tour with this book goes, and I'm really looking forward to reading hopefully your next 2 books.
We shall see. I'm hopeful. I'm very
Yeah.
hopeful.
Thank you so much for sharing so many great things today. I feel like I hope that whoever's listening and for yourself, that you feel proud of all the work that you've done to be the person that you are and to share it with all of us.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much.